Now,
Yeah.
fentanyl is the profits are even bigger than cocaine because fentanyl, you've got these tiny little chemical stuff. It's extremely potent, less bulk. You don't have to worry about the whole harvesting process of like growing coca leaves and crop spraying. Labs in China. The Mexican cartels want to even create their own precursors. So maybe even some point China could be outside the equation. But right now, China's part of this. And you've got Americans dying now. I mean, this is horrific numbers. 107,000 overdose deaths in 2021 in the United States. About 70,000 involve fentanyl. Another 30,000 involve crystal meth.
They're using it as weapons now, too. I'm seeing over and over again. It's becoming more and more common. We're seeing police officers go down from fentanyl exposure. Before we get into the fentanyl crisis, I want to rewind, and I do want to say I think that the educational program that you're speaking of, is that just your idea, or is somebody looking at maybe implementing that? Because that could really work. In my initial thought was there's no way that's going to work because there's going to be multi-generational cartel members. But then when you talk about how their life is, one of the questions I ask a lot of the special operations guys, that I interview on here is, would you want your kid to have the life that you had knowing what you know now? And I don't know the exact number, but it's got to be 90% say, no, I don't want my kid to have to live through that.
Well, that's like, working on special operations with a government salary and people consider you a hero, let alone being, a cartel figure. I mean, like I said, there's different people, and some of them are unrepentant. Mm-hmm. Some of them have made it work for them. There's traffickers who've made this stuff work for them, have ended up stashing their assets and making deals with the government and they end up being kind of clean with it. But a lot of people, they don't want their kids. And it's this, it's bizarre. Like I've been with gang members, cartel members, and they're like, on one side they killed 27 people, and the other side they're talking about they go to the parents' evening at their kids' school, and they're like they're kind of, some of these people. It's a weird, bizarre world, and you get into them. Like a lot of them, they kind of struggle and want to get a normal life out of this and stuff. They kind of live through this area of brutal violence. I think, a lot of, a very good point. I think a lot of the kind of special forces, military people, you can sit down and probably sit in a room with these guys and kind of understand and share a beer or have a cup of coffee because you both had, you've seen extreme violence. You know what it's like. You've seen dead bodies. You know what it's like, okay, how do I process killing this guy? How do I deal with that? Now, some of these sicarios, I think they simply say, well, I'm taking orders. And they are. It's killing machines. You're recruited in. It's just like, well, I've got orders to go and kill these guys. That's what I'm doing. But if you look at, like, why does the real severe violence come about? Like, why, and ask this question, why do they leave? The worst atrocity, or one of the worst atrocities in Mexico, which I've covered, was 49 bodies dumped on a road, all decapitated, all with their hands cut off and their feet cut off. Dumped on a road. I got a call, and it was Sunday morning, it's 2012, I got a call, something's happening up in Monterrey. Oh, I jumped on a plane, flew up there. When I got up there, they'd taken the bodies and put them in the morgue. So I went in the morgue, and the smell of 49 bodies that they couldn't identify because they had no heads, no hands, and no feet. Just 49 lumps of meat. And it's like, why do they do that? What are they doing? Stuff. I actually recently met one of the guys in the cartel in prison in the United States who was involved in that cartel and gave me a bit of an explanation for what they were doing with that there. But one of the things you see is you have combatants, people with structures, irregular armed organizations. And they're told to control territory. Top of their boss, you've got to control territory. So how do we control territory? We use terror. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, they are using terror or terrorists, but the same way that the military groups have done this for forever. How do we control this territory? We've got to make people scared of us.
I mean, it makes sense. You know,
Yeah.
as brutal as it is, it does make a hell of a lot of sense. And when you're recruiting, you know, kids that are 12, 13 years old, I mean, by the time, I mean, they have to be desensitized like that.
Yeah. So,
You know?
they're training up these kids. Now I tell you a horror story of on that same investigation. Same time I went up there. So I was in the morgue, 49 bodies, and making sense of this. And I came out of the morgue, and there was a bunch of like family members looking. And like I was like, you know, what's going on? They talked to one woman. He said, oh, you know, we're trying to find if our loved ones who have disappeared are among these victims. So we want to do DNA tests. And this one woman I talked to was a school teacher. And she described how her son was dragged out of their home on one evening, 18-year-old son, philosophy student. What happened was she was sitting there. She had her two sons there, one 18-year-old, one 15-year-old. And suddenly the door, bang, 15 guys come in with guns. Because once you get these armed groups, they can start, ravaging, attacking the local population. Storm in the house, start grabbing stuff. And then they say to her, which of your sons is the oldest? And she's like, can't even answer, can't even speak. Like, how to answer that? And the elder son raised his hand and said, I'm the eldest. You're not going to take my little brother. And they took him. She got a phone call the next day. Okay, give us this amount of money, we'll give your son back. She got the money. What you do as a parent at that moment? Got the money, wherever she could. Relatives went up, handed it in, phoned up, no response. That was it, her son was gone. She was wandering around these events, these morgues, trying to find him. Other mothers I've talked to, very similar stories, who eventually found and identified the bodies of their kids after like 3 years. One of them in Veracruz, and I talked to her when she was looking for her kid who was taken away by armed men. This guy worked at customs, 24 years old. And eventually she identified his body. She become with a group of mothers searching for, you've just got thousands of disappearances that have come out of this conflict. So she was searching for him with these various mothers. They were like marching. And a guy pulled up in a car and said, check out this place. And he had like a hand-drawn map. You might find some bodies here. So they went there first they said to tell the government, we got this information of her. The government were like, whatever. So they went there themselves and started digging up in this field. And started finding bones, skulls, bodies. Turned out to be the biggest mass grave in Mexico in the modern time, 297.
297 remains.
I mean, and this is like, 297 skulls. I mean, this is a mess because it's even hard. These like bones, 5 years old, 8 years old, 1 year old, 2 year old remains. They started pulling them out. Eventually, after several years, her son was identified in this mass grave. While they were pulling them out, so you start getting that smell again, that smell of kind of bodies being pulled out. Right in front of it was a housing area. Attempts at middle-class homes, the kind of, kiddies, bikes, basketball hoops, and the families that write things saying, well, we're getting this stink of this coming into our housing. And that's how like bizarre and messed up this conflict is.
That makes me just rethink what are they trying to achieve by storming people's houses and just pulling their kids out and killing them, telling them that they're going to take a ransom for it and then killing them.
So I think what happens a lot, I mean, there's every case has got different stories. But in that case, what you can happen, I mean, like, you've got the brutal soldiers, and you can relate to this, being a soldier imagine the most kind of brutal soldiers, but soldiers who haven't gone through like good recruitment. They've kind of recruited the kind of meanest, hateful people they can find from the streets. But in a sense, they're victims and victimizers to an extent. But yeah, still, hateful, brutal people, train them up, make them bloody, and tell you guys got to control these territories, give them guns, make them commit terror. Then once you've got an armed group out there committing terror, okay, we want some money. It's just going to raid a house. It's going to raid a store. It's going to steal a car. Do what we like. Raid someone's house, steal some stuff. Okay, we'll take this son, let's get him to pay a ransom. Kill him anyway. Maybe we killed him already. Maybe we beat the crap out of this kid and killed him already. Or maybe we will recruit these people, and you get people who are recruited and forced to do stuff. Recruit them, force them, put themselves, give these people we recruit, give them a gun and tell them to do some stuff.
Yeah.
Or hack up bodies, or do this or do that. It's brutal. It's kind of one of the crazy things about this is this. I mean, that kind of level of almost like medieval kind of warfare, kind of medieval morality in this stuff. And in some ways you can look at medieval stuff, the way these cartels operate. It's like fealty. You've got like one powerful drug boss, and then a guy below who's like swearing fealty to him, and a guy below swearing fealty to him. But that's happening. At the same time, you got like, say, $1 trillion economy. You got you go to Mexico City, and you can sit in a Starbucks and sit there on your laptop, and you can go to a trendy bar. You can go to Cancun and go to some beautiful beaches, and that's happening as well at the same time. So it's kind of weird how this kind of normality is around.